let's dive into today's chapter, which is Davos 5. It's been a while since we have been with Davos. So this is chapter 54. I just want to see. The last time we were at Davos was 36. So been quite a while.
Yeah.
So Salador Sand tells King Stannis Baratheon of the Red Wedding, how the Freys sewed the head of Robb Stark's direwolf Greywind on the king's shoulders and nailed a crown on its head. Catelyn Stark was slain and thrown naked into the river. Queen Selyse and Axel Florent declare that it was the hand of R'hllor that killed the usurpers, but Stannis knows it was Lord Walder Frey's handiwork. When Stannis wants to send word that he will pardon any Ironman or Northman who swears fealty, Melisandre tells him that the flames revealed that new kings will pick up where the old ones died. The seven kingdoms must be shown a sign, but Stannis has heard enough talk of stone dragons, knowing all of the follies the Targaryens caused by trying to return the dragons to life. Davos persuades the king by asking Melisandre why she needs Edric Storm's life to raise a stone dragon. He also inquires how her leeches were responsible for the two kings' deaths, when one was killed by Walder Frey and the other, Balon Greyjoy, fell from a bridge. He also points out that only two of the three false kings are dead so far. The Red Woman has answers, but Stannis sends her away. Still, not completely satisfied that he should spare Edric's life, the king sends Davos away as well. The Onion Knight seeks out Maester, I always forget this guy's name. Pylos, yes. Pylos, who has been teaching him how to read. Davos begins to slowly read a letter that arrived sometime before the wall. The missive speaks of Lord Jeor Mormont's defeat at the Fist, and Maester Aemon's fear that the wildlings may conquer the wall. Pylos reveals that he showed the letter to Alistair, but the king and Melisandre are not aware of any of the warning's existence. So this is honestly it's a great chapter. And again, if you're reading POV by Davos, it's like, okay, wow, you just jumped like 14 chapters and you get a lot of the big events happen. But it's what we talked about last time, where it's like, okay, we got Tyrion's perspective of it and the Lannisters. Now we're jumping to Stannis, who we haven't been with for a while. And you get to see Stannis's reaction to all of these things. And you kind of remember, oh yeah, he's a player and he's still out there. And you get to see, because remember, that was, I would say, Joffrey's biggest challenge. Yeah. Right. Was Stannis. I mean, they almost, if it weren't for Tyrion, they would have lost.
Oh yeah. They were a hair away from losing that battle, and Stannis being seated on the Iron Throne, and R'hllor being lifted up in King's Land. I mean, what a good what if situation there to think about. But also with this chapter, it starts to really come to light that George is operating on a whole nother level here. Like, we just did the Red Wedding, we have the Purple Wedding to go, but here he starts setting up the here comes the cavalry moment that is tremendous. I remember the first time I read it, I was like, it actually genuinely shocked me whenever he shows up to save the day. And I'm like,
oh, it's huge.
I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah, I could not believe it at the time. On a reread, obviously we have the clues here, but it's a crazy thing to think that George is setting up so much right here, right now, not only with Stannis, but also when we hear that Catelyn had been thrown into the river. And then at the end of the book, of course, being introduced to Lady Stoneheart in a way where we can tell that she indeed was thrown into a river, plus all the prophecies and symbolisms for Catelyn and the fish and all that good stuff. Like, it's just packed.
Yeah, it's huge. Yes, so much really does happen in this chapter. And another thing, real quick, a character that is so overlooked in the books, I think, even just because like the way the show has tainted everything, is Edric Storm.
Yeah, absolutely, dude.
Huge difference, mega difference.
Absolutely.
Because obviously the show didn't even include it, right? Yeah. They just put everything into oh god, what's his name? I'm blanking on it right now. What is the guy's name? How am I blanking on it?
Talking about Gendry?
Gendry, yes. Yeah. They just rolled him into one character, but Edric Storm, totally different character. And there's a guy where it's like, what's going to happen with him in Winds of Winter?
Yeah,
huge difference, because like in the show, Gendry gets Storm's End, and he wants, remember he tries to get with Arya, and he's like, you could be my lady, and all this stuff. but we don't know what's going to happen with Edric Storm. Totally different character. He's like hiding in lists is like the last thing we hear of him.
Yeah, definitely a wild card when it comes to predicting things for Winds of Winter. One of the more fun aspects on a reread is keeping an eye on him and trying to figure out exactly where George is going to go with that character.
Do you think Daenerys is going to run into him at all?
Oh, that would be interesting. A
son of Robert Baratheon.
Ooh, man, that would really fill out her really weird cabinet, right? She has a Lannister, she has a Baratheon,
or she kills him.
Ooh, no, I don't think she would. I don't think she would. No, because remember, one of the biggest lessons is that Robert was able to take his enemies and like drink with them after. Like that's like a very forefront value that's in a good leader, at least in this series. So I think that it's more interesting if Daenerys takes him in and being like, look, I even have a bastard Baratheon over here. Like
I don't know, because maybe the whole deal with the Tarleys that we saw in the show could be a deal with him. Remember where
Tyrion that's true.
Urges her not to burn them, and then she does in the show. Or maybe he's a character who just slips off, and that's it.
Well, that could
I don't know, man. He seems like he's a little more important.
Well, and if that did happen, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world because we do have to wrap this big boy up and finish out some of these storylines. But I think it's fun to speculate about. I love the idea of him meeting Daenerys. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to see. But he's it's just pretty interesting because he's sent over. I mean, really like nothing, almost like really you just see him here and then like that's it. He's just one of those many characters who just sort of slips off. And you get like a few passing lines,
like Tyrick.
Yeah, I mean,
is he a horse?
He's mentioned in after this. He's really only mentioned in A Dance with Dragons, chapter 15, Davos 2, and then he is actually only mentioned in the appendixes of A Dance with Dragons and A Feast for Crows to talk about like where he's at and whatnot. So like George it's not even super included in the story.
Dude, yeah. I mean, that does feel when character.
Listen, George has too much.
when characters slip off, they end up in an SS with Danny somehow. Like, if you think about it.
Yeah. Okay. Some big takeaways from this chapter, Jimmy. What were some of your
all the symbolism and personal conflict between ego, the divine, and charlatans? I mean, there's so much here to unpack. This is the big takeaway for me here. Davos is someone who has literally seen with his own two eyes a shadow baby being born out of Melisandre and then did a deed of killing a king or a prospective king, right? Yet he denies. He says those leeches did not kill those kings, which is kind of interesting, right? You would imagine that maybe he would be a little bit more bought in. And on the other side of this thing, you have Stannis Baratheon, who has been following her, believes in her prophecy that he, is the Lord of Light, all these things. But he is also looking at her and he's like, Stone Dragon, like, I've had enough of this. But there's still a little bit of belief in him, right?
It's just because he's seen it.
Yeah. Whereas Davos feels almost convicted in his doubt, I would say. Stannis has a sliver of belief, and that's kind of what is the only thing separating him from being, I think, fully Team Davos. And I think that sliver of belief is actually ego. I think. Yeah. So it's just weird because like Melisandre is clearly magical in some way, fantastical. I don't know why. We are not sure, but there's still people being like, I don't really believe that, which is just wild.
Yeah, it's with Stannis, it's almost in a way, it's like the Starks, like keep your wolves close. Like he needs to keep his onion knight close.
That's right.
Yeah. And it's literally like, the angel and the devil on the shoulder. Like, which one are you going to listen to? And, and the more he listens to Melisandre, the less he sees. And like, that's something we have to get through too, is him burning Shireen.
Yeah.
In Winds of Winter. And
George said that would happen.
Right, which does obviously raise the question of like, well, why does that need to happen? Because a lot of people argue that it's like, well, it seems like Stannis is going to win.
That's going to happen.
Right. So, or maybe Stannis is like, hey, we have to go to Hardhome. Maybe Jon gets resurrected, and because Hardhome is going to be so different in Winds of Winter, like it's already so different because it's Jon's not there, or maybe
Yeah.
he has to go there. We don't know what's going to happen, but if it does just go down the same way that Stannis loses, then yeah, and he gets pushed back, and then he burns Shireen so that hopefully he could win, and then it's literally just like a lost cause, and then it's just like, why did I just do that?
Which would be pretty well, maybe satisfying is not the right word, but it would be I would say it would be consistent with Stannis's arc and the things that George is exploring with him, right? Belief
Right.
and doubt in what's right, what's justice. Is it justice? What's more of a priority? Your claim on this throne that you feel like is your right, and that's just, that is all justified. Is that justified if you're then burning your daughter to do so? Like,
Right.
I don't
Well, I
think it
think,
necessarily is.
yeah, and we're probably going to get that through a Melisandre chapter,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we don't have
Most
like
likely.
direct Stannis. We don't have direct Stannis chapters. So the really interesting thing about that is if we ever see that moment in Winds of Winter, and if it's through Melisandre's eyes, are we going to see it as a failure? Because that's something the show it didn't dive into enough. I don't felt
Mhm.
like, I mean, we did get it where Davos is like, hey, I don't want to, super pissed at her or the whole deal, but it's just like it needs to be like a massive monumental deal where he shuns her away and everything, and like she should almost like kill her. It needs to be way, way, way bigger in the books because it's such a big deal. Like, even if she does then go resurrect Jon Snow, like she still kills a child for what she believes is going to be true, and she led everybody along. Like, that needs to be a bigger part of like the power struggle, because then she just comes back in at the end, lights the swords, and dies. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it needs to be a much more monumental deal with her character, and then maybe that's why like her resurrecting Jon has to be like huge, because from her perspective, even here you see it in this chapter where it's like Davos, even after you said, he sees what she has done, and he's still kind of like, I don't know if we should trust her. And Stannis on the other side being like, well, I don't know, bro. Have you seen what she's been doing? Like, I mean,
Mhm.
you've seen it with your own eyes, and you believe in me. I believe in me. She believes I'm supposed to be something even bigger and better. But that moment that we're waiting for in Winds of Winter, I mean, if she's the one who tortures Shireen thinking it's going to save Stannis, and it fails, and then Stannis fails after she's put all this effort into
Yeah.
propping him up, like, I really hope we get, especially if it's in Melisandre chapters, that internal struggle as to why, like, that failure and why it's such a big deal. And then that will actually help the Jon
Yes.
Snow resurrection feel like, oh no, like, actually Stannis and all that specifically led me to Jon,
Mhm.
and it'd be such a big deal.
Always finding the divine justification for things. I mean, if you think about it from a reader perspective, and you go in with the idea that she is the most misunderstood character, that was said by George, not us. In an interview somewhere, sometime, George said that Melisandre was the most misunderstood character. So the way that you could delve into that misunderstanding and the nuance of it is to have Shireen's burning be through Melisandre's POV. And as a reader, we are going to detest her, but she's going to probably have internal thoughts and conversations with herself that we would get from her POV as the reader that will start to hopefully wear us down into being able to see her side of things, or at least her way of thinking. I don't think anyone's going to forgive her for what she did, but a really good way of making her more of a struggle to hate as the reader is to have her resurrect Jon Snow, which we all want. So it she becomes a tool that was used essentially to kill Shireen, but she's also a tool to resurrect our fan favorite character. Well, dang, that makes me feel pretty conflicted about her on the whole, right? So I think it leads itself to be a lot more, I would say, compelling to have
Yeah.
a POV of her from the stream burning. So
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll have to see Davos's perspective. There is a line here early. It's like the first thing that kind of, I think, signifies a lot of this chapter, and ultimately what I think Davos thinks of Melisandre. So he says, he's talking about the Red Wedding and what happens. He says, yet in the cities the lions prance and dance. The Red Wedding, the small folk are calling it. They swear Lord Frey had the boys' heads hacked off, sewed on the head of his direwolf, and in place they nailed a crown about his ears. His lady's mother was slain as well and thrown naked into the river. At a wedding, thought Davos, as he sat at his slayer's board, a guest beneath his roof. These Freys are cursed. He could smell the burning blood again and hear the leeches hissing and spitting on the brazier's hot coals. It was the Lord's wrath that slew him, Sir Axel Florent declared. It was the hand of R'hllor. And then they say, praise the light, sang out of Queensleaf. So Davos is sitting there thinking about like another custom and another, like the way the gods react to things, which is like, oh, what these Freys did are cursed. And so maybe in a way, like that's like what an opening line here. It's another thing where, because that's such a big part of this chapter is right, like R'hllor, and well, look at the things Melisandre has done. Like that's the conversation between Stannis and Davos. But Davos also thinking like he also knows that slaying guests beneath your roof. The gods don't like that.
Davos has had a kind of a supernatural experience on that island. Remember him praying and how many times he brings up Mother and then things happen around him. It's definitely
he didn't pray to R'hllor on the island.
Exactly. So he I wouldn't say he's a full devout believer or whatever, but he's clearly working for some religious entity, at least I think in his head. So he has foundations, he has beliefs, and also Stannis would pound that into his head, being his knight, right?
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing the way George presents like the gods to us. Like a lot of it is like a lot of Catelyn chapters. It makes sense because she praises the seven, and you get a lot of that. But I do love the talk of the gods and everything that we get through Davos, because he's isn't somebody who's super religious, but it's such a big part of his chapters is R'hllor and these things. So I love the lens that he gives us into looking into the gods based upon like these characters, because every character in their own way provides us with a lens into certain aspects of life, and it's always usually a big difference of that person, right? Like for Sansa, so much of it is the courts and how what she believes initially of the songs and everything. Well, that's not the case, whatsoever. With Ned Stark, it's like honor and being truthful, and here you have Davos, who it's really like reality and gods, and it's just such an interesting dynamic considering he is, like you said, like not a very religious person.
Yeah, it's funny. We always talk about how George plays with our expectations of what comes out of an epic fantasy, especially for this time period, but he also uses it in the story a lot, the expectations of the characters and them having to react about how they're wrong or even sometimes how they're right. And they have little that they can do about it, such as Tyrion being convinced that Cersei's out to get him, which it turns out she is, but he can't really do much about it because he's not in a position of power. So expectations are something George is constantly playing with.
Yeah. There's some other lines I want to pull out from this chapter just because it's so ridiculous. Because Davos is questioning a lot of this. And Stannis is somewhat too. He is mine own blood. Stop clutching me, woman. King Stannis put a hand on her shoulder, awkwardly untangling himself from her grasp. Perhaps Robert did curse our marriage bed. He swore to me that he never meant to shame me, that he was drunk and never knew which bedchamber he entered that night. But does it matter? The boy was not at fault, whatever the truth. Melisandre put her hand on the king's arm. The Lord of Light cherishes the innocent. There is no sacrifice more precious. From his king's blood and his untainted fire, a dragon shall be born. So you need to sacrifice an innocent person?
They're trying to fancy it up, like think, what could come of something for this such a big ask from our Lord and Savior,
Right.
Lord. It's the justification is so gross.
He cherishes the innocent, so
much so
that you have to kill somebody to show him. It's like, so you would not be innocent in this sacrifice. Like the whole ritual seems off to me.
Yeah, I don't like it.
Well, I'm sure most people who are getting it don't like it either.
Yeah, I don't think Edric's a fan. I don't think so.
Right. And it's like so weird. So it's like, hold on a second. So Melisandre can just sleep with
Well,
uh
you know, she's a
Stannis and then have the shadow baby and it can do stuff, but you also need to like kill like a lot of it doesn't make sense.
yeah. There's some hypocrisy there, maybe some inconsistencies. You would say that
Yeah.
never happens in our real world. Thank God.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of the reasons that in George's storytelling for this whole thing is that I like that we get Mira Mazda first
Yeah.
into blood magic before we get to Melisandre, because she I think kind of paints it out more plainly than anyone. It's
Mhm.
like, yeah, you can do it, but there's a cost. Whereas for Melisandre, it seems like, well, that cost doesn't even matter. It's a gift. You should want to do it.
Yeah,
It's a
we should all be
sacrifice.
happy to sacrifice ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very different interpretation of what I believe to be the same power, whatever that magic is, whatever God is behind it or entity or whatever. I think all of them it comes back to one.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so another pretty interesting paragraph here I want to pull out. So this is when he's talking about um about a lot of this, like Lightbringer and whatnot. So Edric, he started, is one boy. He may be the best boy who ever drew breath, and it would not matter. My duty is to the realm. His hand swept across the painted table. How many boys dwell in Westeros? How many girls? How many men? How many women? The darkness will devour them all, she says. The night that never ends. She talks of prophecies, a hero reborn in the sea, living dragons hatched from the dead stone. She speaks of signs and swears they point to me. I never asked for this, no more than I asked to be king. Yet dare I disregard her? He ground his teeth. We do not choose our destinies, yet we must. We must do our duty. No, great or small, we must do our duty. Melisandre swears that she has seen me in her flames, facing the dark with Lightbringer raised on high. Lightbringer. Stannis gave a derisive snort. It glimmers prettily, I'll grant you, but on the Blackwater, this magic sword served me no better than any common steel. A dragon would have turned that battle. Aegon once
Mhm.
stood here as I do, looking down on this table. Do you think you would name him Aegon the Conqueror today if he had no dragons? Your grace, said Davos, the cost.
Yes, and I think this kind of gets to the root of the issue. And remember when I was talking about that ego and like he kind of wants to hang on just a little bit. And I think it's all because Stannis is trying to wrestle with the fact that he lost to Blackwater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, this is where you also get to see Stannis, because we have this back and forth, right? Where sometimes he's like, Davos, I need to listen to you more. Well, now he's listening to Melisandre more.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and then you have Davos continuing, like here, talking about, part of him wanted nothing so much to take Devon and go home. I cannot yet, not yet. I am a lord now in the king's hand. I must not fail him.
Mhm.
But you're hearing there's so much more talk of like wizards and dragons and bringing them back. But Robert and Stannis like hated the Targaryens and they hated dragons. And now you're thinking like, oh, if we had the power of dragons, we would be able to do anything. Robert didn't need a dragon to
That's right.
defeat the Targaryens.
Preach.
I'm just, I mean, they didn't have dragons either. There's a reason that they got rid of them.
That's right. That's right.
And you now have this magic woman. You have more power. You have more magic than the other people.
I think it's also interesting just how Stannis views power comparatively. Like I think he understands that there's a huge responsibility with it, but I also think that Stannis thinks there's no one better suited to carry that responsibility than his own studious self. Like he's the only one that can really wield this um with the proper skill, I guess you would say, or some sort of morality behind it.
Yeah. Um, and we also get here, real quick. This is our first hearing of like Dragonbinder
Mm.
is brought up in this chapter. So Davos turned to Salador Sand beside him. Does this mean you have forgiven my treachery, Sala? The old pirate waved a finger at him. Forgiving, yes. Forgetting, no. All that good gold on Claw Isle that might have been mine. It makes me old and tired to think about it. When I die, excuse me, when I die impoverished, my wives and concubines will curse you, Onion Lord. Lord Celtigar had many fine wishes that now I am not tasting a sea eagle he had trained to fly from the wrist, a magic horn to summon krakens from the deep. Very useful such a horn would be to pull down Tyroshi and other vexing creatures. But did I have this horn to blow? No, because the king made my old friend his hand. He slipped his arm through Davos and said, "The Queen's men love you not, old friend. I'm hearing that this certain hand has been making friends of his own." This is true, yes. And then it just kind of goes back on to, talk about Melisandre. But yeah,
Nice little tidbit there. We should pay attention
clearly,
to that.
yeah, clearly George at this point has already got the idea of Dragonbinder, because we haven't really like met Euron, had Kingsmoot, or any of that stuff yet.
Yeah. And it shows once again that the world's about to get a lot more complicated. There's another factor to put into the equation, and George is
Yeah,
juggling them all.
and bigger. So I wonder what do you think? What do you think he was thinking about at this point? Like
Honestly, I
where his
don't
story is
know.
gonna go.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, just because like, okay, now he's introducing the perhaps that there's a horn, as they're talking about bringing dragons back. There's a magic horn that could actually control dragons or bring dragons down. So Euron thinks he has that.
Yeah,
So
and I'm sure that he wants other people to believe that he has that.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So continuing on a little bit here. They talk a little bit more about like some pirate stuff. Davos reflects, on like the steps of the Sea Dragon Tower to the Maester's chambers below the Rookery. He did not need Salladhor Sand to tell him he had risen too high. I cannot read, I cannot write. The lords despise me. I know nothing of ruling. How can I be the king's hand? I belong on the deck of a ship, not in a castle tower. So you're also still kind of getting this struggle, from Davos, even to remember exactly who he is. Not only is he trying to keep Stannis from, Davos is actually a very complex character, even though he, for the most part, I would say of all of our POVs, he, like on surface level, seems like he's just like he's probably the least flexible, right? I guess that's the word. Like he's the one who
Yeah.
changed.
Right.
I think you could argue he's the one you think probably changes the least, but he's a way more complex when you really like pay attention and dive into his chapters.
Yeah, and he's born again after the Battle of Blackwater Bay on that little piece of land. I mean, really, it feels very religious in a sense, and now he's being put up against this false priestess, as at least what he believes. And Davos is very complex because he is at war with himself about what he would rather be doing, where he belongs, and then his duty to his king who made him a knight. And duty is all over Song of Ice and Fire. Obviously, John being the best example, but Davos too.
Yeah. Okay, so you continue on again. This is when he goes and he talks to Maester Pylos. Little tidbit here, I just want to bring up. As he's walking around, the near twisting of the steps of the Sea Dragon Tower had been a sore trial to Maester Crescent after he broke his hip. Davos still found himself missing the old man. He thought Stannis must as well. Pylos seemed clever and diligent and well-meaning, but he was so young, and the king did not confide in him as he had in Crescent. The old man had been with Stannis so long until he ran afoul of Melisandre and died for it. At the top of the steps, Davos heard a soft jingle of bells that could only herald Patchface. The princess's fool was waiting outside the maester's door for her like a faithful hound. And then that talks a little about him. Patchface wore a helm made of a rack of deer antlers strapped to a tin bucket. A dozen bells hang from the tines and rang when he moved, which meant constantly, since the fool seldom stood still. He jingled and jangled his way everywhere he went. Small wonder that Pylos exiled him from Shireen's lessons. Under the sea, the old fish eat the young fish, the fool muttered at Davos. He bobbed his head and his bells clanged and chimed and sang. I know, I know, I know.
Man, the visual there is crazy.
Yeah.
Patchface, definitely one of the more fun characters to listen to and to speculate from. Way diminished in the show compared to the book.
Yeah, huge deal. But that whole jingling the bells thing, a lot of think, the saddest part was the bells, right? The jingling of the bells. Well, it also does tie into Patchface, perhaps not the character Jingle Bells, at the Red Wedding.
I like that quite a bit. Very,
That's
very cool connection.
that's that's certainly one of them. Of course, I think that the whole Bells, there's a big Bells theory about Daenerys. I'm still keeping going. So okay, any other big final takeaways from this chapter, Jimmy?
No, just the ball's moving, and the Here Comes the Cavalry has been kind of set in motion with the last little bit with Davos. Davos has struggled to read his main mission, becoming literate. And I'm excited to see him next time. Might be a while.
I think it is. Let me look and see the next time we even see
Is
Davos.
there another Davos chapter?
So this is 54, 63. So about another like 9 chapters. So
That's not
and
too
then
bad.
so we have one more Davos chapter, and then you don't see him again until A Dance with Dragons.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's crazy. The world just getting bigger and bigger. And the next chapter for Davos, which is a ways away, is pretty huge because it's the one that ends with Stannis draws Lightbringer to behead Davos. But the Onion Knight begins to read out the letter that Maester Pylos received from the Night's Watch. So so that's where we're headed with headed, pun intended, with Davos there in 9 chapters. So a whole lot's gonna happen. It doesn't seem like it, but it's like, dang, a lot's gonna happen in these next nine chapters.
Absolutely. Davos is just missing it all.